Okay, so remediation plan.
Yeah. See here, I gotta get to the right
Okay.
page here.
Okay.
So remediation plan is what I was talking about earlier on when we were
Mm-hmm.
finishing up the financial inclusion or whatever. So you start with the premise that you know, accept or reject the risk. And ultimately, those are your two final choices. But there's a crucial third path, which is before you get there, which is there something we can do to reduce the risk that we might otherwise reject? And it could be gathering more information, it could be uh, reducing the types of activity that comes through us. It could be a whole bunch of things. It could be asking our respondent bank to do additional work and monitor it to see if they're doing it. But what we found was that crucial third path was where we ended up spending a lot of our effort. And, you know, for example, you know, let's say that one of our respondent banks got a consent order for bad AML. You know, which, you know, quite frankly, for most of the time that I was there, we were under a consent order for AML. So, you know, those things happen. Uh, but and you know, ironically, there was more than a few compliance calls I had with our banks that they were asking me about our program because they were getting negative news on us, and I was more than happy to respond to those calls.
Right.
But but we did need to be disciplined about it because
Mm-hmm.
on the remediation, you know, embedded in the words is that there's something we need to fix or remedy. And so we needed to be very careful that we actually defined what the problem was, that we had some sort of milestones or action items that we were going to do, and that we truly solved the problem. You know,
Right.
we couldn't just throw something into remediation saying, oh, yeah, we know that they've got a consent order, and so we're going to watch them a little bit more carefully. I mean, that's not actionable enough. That's just kicking the can down the
Yeah.
road. You know, we needed to, you know, go and talk to our customers and say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, how did it happen? What changes did you make? You know, and most of the time, the changes aren't something you can do overnight. It may take years. And then we would change our risk ranking on the customers so that our systems were more sensitive. We might do a lot more activity reviews. It wouldn't be at all unusual that we go from an annual activity review to, you know, maybe twice a year or sometimes four times a year that you're doing it. You
Right.
might have more senior people, and this was very common, you know, where I would have to be looking at the activity on a quarterly basis or whatever to make sure that, you know, I personally was comfortable with it. Uh, but all of that was part of the remediation period, and we had to have timelines to make sure that we weren't just aimlessly going through it. And if we had a customer in remediation too long, you know, our governance committees rightfully were asking, hey guys, you know, when are you going to actually
Right.
bring this thing to closure? Uh, Now, most of the time, you know, we would reprioritize and get the work done. But there was other times where we're just saying, you know, it it doesn't look like it's getting solved
Mm.
uh, for whatever reason. And you know, maybe at that point we'd either restrict the account and say, you know, we're not going to allow certain types of activity until it's fixed, or do something else. But the real thing about remediation plans is number one, it's got to be actionable and measurable. And number two, you need to have an acceptable level of risk while you're remediating it. You know, it's
Mm.
no defense if, you know, I don't think anyone would ever do this, but let's say you've got a customer that's evading sanctions and you
Mm.
said, okay, well, we're going to watch them evade
Yeah.
sanctions for the next year, and then hopefully in a year they're going to stop it.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, that's just unacceptable. So,
Mm.
you know, you have to make sure that the stuff that's going through you while they're working on their program or working on whatever is acceptable. It's just how
Yeah.
much effort you're going to do and who's gonna do it, while you're in that interim stage. I mean, you're you're never you're never allowed to totally accept, unacceptable risk while someone's trying to fix something.
Right. And I think that this remediation um, phase is very important because many times we saw that the customer had really made significant changes. And then I think that if this step was skipped, then that opportunity would have been lost. So I think that this really adds value not only for the customers, but I think that as a whole financial inclusion approach, because it really gives everybody the second chance.
Yeah, no, I agree. And actually, some of my favorite customers were in remediation because, um, one of the things I would do is I would step up, my level of contact with them, and almost always we wouldn't put a customer in remediation unless we thought that they were working on the remedies.
Right,
And so, I'd be having relatively granular discussions with them on what's happening. And, we'd be talking about the activity that was going through us in the interim in much more detail. And so, you know, because of the relationship nature of the compliance calls, since I was having more frequent calls with them and more frequent activity reviews or whatever, we just
right.
grew closer.
Yeah,
And quite frankly, I would hope that many of them would think, that we were helping them. Because,
exactly.
if we had observations about, well, we saw, one technique that worked to deal with this problem was A, B, and C,
Mm,
maybe they would adopt that.
right,
I mean, we had a joint interest in remedying the problem. And having said that, the fact that we ourselves were in a consent order, um, I think number one made us more sympathetic, but number two, uh, I think gave us some credibility that, w- w-
yeah,
we
exactly.
realize that no one is perfect. Now, having said that, being in a consent order meant that we didn't have any room for getting it wrong. So, we might have to redirect the activity or, do some other things, a little bit quicker because we absolutely couldn't afford to have material bad activity to continuously go through us, during this period. But it wasn't most of the time, it wasn't that much of a problem because it was generally a pretty confined issue that we were dealing with, and the activity that was going through us, while they were solving it tended to be more benign stuff.
Sure, right.